The command ship Kavran Ascendant hummed with triumph as it drifted through Jupiter's orbital space, its iridescent hull reflecting the gas giant's swirling storms. Inside, the bridge pulsed with bioluminescent displays showing the complete encirclement of Earth's solar system. Holographic markers dotted every major shipping lane, patrol routes, and defensive positions, all painted in the victorious crimson of the Kavran Coalition. The commander stood at the center of it all, its 7-foot frame casting angular shadows across the bridge. Its multifaceted red eyes swept over the tactical display with satisfaction, mandibles clicking in a rhythm its subordinates recognized as pleasure. The segmented carapace that covered its body gleamed with fresh polish, each piece of natural armor bearing the glowing sigils of rank and achievement. "Observe," the commander spoke, its voice a grating harmonic translated through the ship's neural interface. 3 rotations since the humans' last transmission. Their silence speaks of resignation. It gestured with one of its 6 limbs toward the holographic Earth, suspended in miniature before them. A world that once thought itself significant, now reduced to whimpering behind its orbital stations. The bridge crew, a mixture of Kavran, Zephyrian gas breathers, and the crystalline Nexari, chittered and buzzed their agreement. Victory celebrations had been ongoing for cycles, with each species contributing their own rituals of dominance. The humans had proven less resilient than their reputation suggested. "Commander," a junior officer approached, its movements sharp with nervous energy. "The outer patrol reports no movement from the Kuiper Belt. The region remains silent." "As expected," the commander replied, mandibles spreading in what might have been a smile. The humans lacked the technology to mount meaningful resistance from such distances. Their primitive vessels would be detected long before reaching our perimeter. 2 billion kilometers away, hidden within the irregular mass of asteroid KBO 2278 Delta, Admiral Chris Kellerman stood before a curved viewport that showed nothing but the endless black of space. The asteroid's hollowed-out core housed a base that officially didn't exist, its heat signatures masked by the frozen rock's natural emissions. Behind him, the nerve center of Earth's most desperate gamble buzzed with subdued activity. "Admiral," the voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Kim Mitchell, Chris's second-in-command. Her voice carried the weight of exhaustion that had become endemic among Earth's remaining forces. "Fleet status report." Chris turned from the viewport, his weathered features set in grim determination. At 44, he carried the scars of 3 decades in space. The silvered burn across his left temple from a plasma leak on his first command, the slight limp from a boarding action gone wrong, and the premature gray threading through his short-cropped black hair. His hazel eyes, sharp and calculating, swept across the command center, where dozens of technicians worked at stations that hummed with barely contained power. "How many ships are operational?" he asked, his voice carrying the clipped authority of someone who'd learned to make every word count. 43 stealth frigates, 12 heavy cruisers, and the flagship Defiant," Mitchell replied, consulting her tablet. "All running silent, all invisible to their sensors." Chris nodded, but his fists clenched at his sides, a tell that his crew had learned to recognize. The entire human fleet, reduced to 56 vessels hiding in the solar system's backyard like pirates. Earth's Grand Navy, once the pride of 3 worlds, now depended on technology that barely existed 6 months ago. "And Dr. Reese?" "In Lab 7, sir. She's been there for the past 18 hours. Chris's jaw tightened. "Get her!" The laboratory was a maze of jury-rigged equipment and holographic projections, cables snaking across the floor like technological vines. Dr. Jennifer Reese stood hunched over a console, her auburn hair escaping from its practical bun as she fine-tuned equations that seemed to bend the very fabric of space around them. Her green eyes reflected the blue glow of the gravity field projector, intensity radiating from her slight frame. "The field coherence is still fluctuating," she muttered, fingers dancing across the interface. "If we can't stabilize the gravitational lensing, the entire fleet will be visible the moment we engage." Chris approached, his boots echoing in the chamber. "Jen?" She looked up, and for a moment her expression softened. The trust between them had been forged in the desperate months since the Kavran blockade began, when she'd approached him with theories that sounded like science fiction, and he'd bet humanity's survival on her brilliance. "Chris," she said, wiping a grease smudge from her cheek, "the technology is sound, but the power requirements are enormous. Each ship needs its own gravitational field generator, and the synchronization has to be perfect. One ship falls out of phase, and the entire formation becomes visible. Can you do it?" Jen's fingers tapped against the console, her thinking rhythm. "Give me 6 more hours. I can have the fleet ready to move." Chris studied her face, reading the exhaustion and determination in equal measure. "You have 3. The Kavran are getting comfortable, and comfortable enemies make mistakes. We need to be ready to exploit those mistakes." He turned to leave, then paused. "Jen, this has to work." "I know," she replied, already turning back to her equations. "It will." Back in the command center, Chris activated the fleet-wide comm system. Throughout the asteroid base and aboard the hidden ships, screens flickered to life, showing his weathered face. The weight of command settled on his shoulders as he looked into the cameras, knowing that these words might be the last he'd speak to some of these people. "This is Admiral Kellerman. For 4 months we've watched the Kavran strangle our system. They've celebrated our silence, mistaken our patience for surrender. They think they know what humanity is capable of." His voice carried across the hidden fleet, reaching pilots in cramped cockpits and engineers in reactor rooms. They're about to learn they were wrong. He paused, letting his words sink in. Around him, the command center had gone quiet, every technician and officer hanging on his words. "In 6 hours, we move. The stealth fleet will show these aliens what happens when they underestimate the human spirit. Prepare your ships, check your systems, and remember, we're not just fighting for Earth, we're fighting to prove that humanity will never kneel." The comm channel closed, leaving the command center in purposeful silence. Chris returned to the viewport, staring out at the stars that had once seemed so welcoming. Now they were a battlefield, and he was about to lead the smallest fleet in human history into the largest gamble humanity had ever taken. Behind him, status lights began shifting from red to amber as the fleet prepared to wake from its long slumber. The Kavran had celebrated too soon. Earth's stealth fleet was about to remind the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength had always been its refusal to surrender. The council chamber, carved from the asteroid's heart, felt more like a tomb than a command center. 15 of humanity's surviving leaders sat around a circular table, their faces lit by the pale blue glow of holographic displays showing the Kavran blockade in all its suffocating detail. The air recyclers hummed with the strain of keeping the base habitable, a constant reminder of how precarious their situation had become. Admiral Chris Kellerman stood at the head of the table, his hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the assembled faces. Some he'd known for decades, veterans who'd fought in the Titan Rebellion and the Mars Independence War. Others were younger, promoted rapidly as the war consumed Earth's leadership. All of them carried the weight of a civilization teetering on the edge of extinction. "The plan is simple," Chris began, his voice cutting through the chamber's tension. "We use the stealth fleet to break the blockade, hit their command structure, disrupt their supply lines, and force them to spread their forces thin." Counselor Marcus Webb, his silver hair reflecting the holo displays, leaned forward. "Simple?" His laugh was bitter. "Admiral, we're talking about 56 ships against a fleet that outnumbers us 20-1. The Kavran have been preparing for this war for decades. They have battle-tested formations, veteran crews, and technology that makes our best ships look like museum pieces. Which is why we're not going to fight them directly," Chris replied. "We're going to make them fight shadows." The chamber's main display shifted, showing a 3-dimensional map of the solar system. Red markers indicated Kavran positions, a web of ships that had turned humanity's birthplace into a prison. Blue markers showed Earth's hidden assets, scattered and few. "Dr. Reese," Chris nodded toward the chamber's secondary entrance, "explain the technology." Jennifer Reese entered, her usually precise movements betraying exhaustion. She carried a portable projector, its surface scarred from hasty modifications. As she activated it, the chamber filled with a swirling display of gravitational fields and light-bending equations. "The gravitational cloaking system doesn't make our ships invisible," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. "It bends space-time around them, creating a lensing effect that redirects electromagnetic radiation. To enemy sensors, the space our ships occupy appears empty." Counselor Elena Vasquez, Earth's former defense minister, studied the display with skeptical eyes. "The power requirements alone must be enormous. How do you maintain that kind of field coherence across an entire fleet?" Jen's fingers traced the holographic equations, highlighting the critical components. "Each ship mounts its own gravitational field generator, synchronized through quantum entanglement with the others. The fields don't just hide individual ships, they create a network that can mask tactical formations." "And if one ship loses power?" Webb asked. "The network compensates," Jen replied, but her slight hesitation didn't go unnoticed. "The remaining ships can extend their fields to cover the gap, though it reduces overall effectiveness." Chris stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "The Kavran have been monitoring space-time distortions since they arrived. They know our technology, our capabilities. They don't know about this." "Because it's theoretical," Webb shot back. "Admiral, I've read Dr. Reese reports. This technology has never been tested in combat conditions. You're asking us to stake humanity's survival on an experiment." The chamber erupted in argument. Voices rose as counselors debated the plan's merits, their fears and desperation bleeding through professional facades. Chris let them argue, his sharp eyes reading the room's dynamics. Some supported the plan out of desperation, others opposed it from pragmatism. All of them were terrified. "Enough!" Chris's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The chamber fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "We don't have the luxury of certainty. The Kavran are tightening their grip every day. Our orbital stations are running out of supplies. Earth's population is already showing signs of starvation. We have weeks, not months, before they force our surrender." He moved to the display, his weathered hands manipulating the holographic controls. The view shifted to show Earth, blue and fragile, surrounded by the angry red of enemy ships. "This is what we're fighting for," he said quietly. "Not just our lives, but our right to exist as a free species. The Kavran see us as primitives, as an obstacle to their expansion. They've made it clear that humanity's place in their new order is as subjects, not equals." Counselor Vasquez stood, her face grave. "What do you need from us?" "Authorization to deploy the fleet, full tactical command authority, and time." Chris's jaw tightened. "Dr. Reese needs to complete the field calibrations. The ships need final system checks. We get one chance at this." "How long?" Webb asked. 12 hours, Jen interjected. "I can have the network stabilized in 12 hours. "The Kavran aren't going to wait for us to be ready," another counselor pointed out. "Intelligence suggests they're planning something. Troop movements, supply runs to their forward positions. They might be preparing for a final push." Chris nodded grimly. "Which is why we move first. The moment Dr. Reese gives the all-clear, we launch. No delays, no second-guessing." The debate continued for another hour, but the outcome was inevitable. Desperation had narrowed their options to a single desperate gambit. The vote was close, 8-7, but it was enough. As the counselors filed out, Chris remained behind with Jen, studying the tactical displays. The magnitude of what they were attempting pressed down on him like a physical weight. 56 ships against an armada. Technology that existed only in theory. A plan that depended on perfect execution under impossible conditions. "Chris," Jen said quietly, "there's something I didn't mention." He turned to face her, noting the way her hands trembled slightly. "What?" "The field generators produce a distinctive gravitational signature. It's subtle, but if the Kavran know what to look for—" She paused, meeting his eyes. "They'll see us coming." "How distinctive?" "Distinctive enough. Their sensors are sophisticated. If they've been monitoring background gravitational fluctuations, they'll notice the anomaly." Chris was quiet for a long moment, processing this new information. "How long do we have once we activate the fields?" "Hours, maybe less. The moment we power up the network, we're committed, no turning back." Chris nodded slowly. "Then we'd better make those hours count." He activated his comm unit, opening a channel to the fleet. "This is Admiral Kellerman. All ships begin pre-flight sequences. We launch in 12 hours. May God help us all." The asteroid base came alive with purposeful activity. In the hangar bays, crews swarmed over the stealth frigates, checking systems and loading ordnance. In the command center, tactical officers plotted courses and contingencies. And in Lab 7, Jen worked feverishly to perfect the technology that would either save humanity or doom it. The clock was ticking, and the fate of Earth hung in the balance. The corridors of Terra Station buzzed with the controlled chaos of a civilization under siege. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the walls, and the air recyclers worked overtime to maintain breathable atmosphere for the 3 million souls crammed into a facility designed for half that number. Admiral Chris Kellerman moved through the crowds with purpose, his presence parting the sea of refugees and military personnel like a ship's bow cutting through waves. Behind him, Dr. Jennifer Reese struggled to keep pace, her shorter strides forcing her to navigate around clusters of displaced families. She carried a secure data pad, its screen displaying gravitational readings that made her stomach twist with unease. "The fluctuations started 6 hours ago," she explained, as they entered a secured lift. "Subtle at first, but they're getting stronger. Someone's been accessing our sensor networks." Chris's jaw tightened. "Internal access? Has to be. The security protocols are too sophisticated for external penetration." Jen's fingers tapped against the datapad's edge. "Chris, whoever's doing this has clearance levels that match our own. They're not just stealing data, they're mapping our entire defensive network." The lift opened onto the station's command level, where the council chambers occupied the most heavily shielded section. Guards in powered armor flanked the entrance, their weapons gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Chris acknowledged them with a nod, his mind already racing through the implications of what Jen had discovered. Inside the chamber, the emergency session was already underway. Counselor Marcus Webb stood at the central display, his silver hair disheveled and his face flushed with anger. The other counselors sat in tense silence, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright panic. "Impossible to maintain operational security under these conditions," Webb was saying. "We have 3 million civilians on this station, Admiral. Any one of them could be compromised." "The leak isn't coming from the civilian population," Chris interrupted, his voice cutting through Webb's tirade. "Dr. Reese has traced the security breach to someone with high-level access." The chamber fell silent. Jen stepped forward, activating her portable projector. The display showed a network diagram of Terra Station's systems, with highlighted nodes indicating unauthorized access points. "The intrusion began shortly after our last council meeting," she explained. "Someone's been systematically mapping our sensor grids, communication arrays, and defensive positions. They know where our ships are hidden, what our capabilities are, and most importantly, they know about the stealth fleet." Counselor Elena Vasquez leaned forward, her face pale. "Are you suggesting we have a traitor among us?" "I'm suggesting we have a serious security breach," Chris replied carefully. "Whether it's intentional or not, classified information is being transmitted off-station." The implications hung in the air like a toxin. The Council represented humanity's last legitimate government, the survivors of Earth's leadership who'd escaped the planet before the Kavran siege began. If one of them was compromised— "This is ridiculous," Webb said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We've all sacrificed everything for this fight. The suggestion that any of us would—" "The data doesn't lie," Jen interrupted. "The access patterns are too sophisticated for civilian-level intrusion. Someone in this room has been feeding information to the Kavran." Chris studied the faces around the table, looking for tells, the slight facial twitches, the avoiding of eye contact, the nervous gestures that betrayed guilt. Counselor David Mitchell sat with his hands folded, his sunken blue eyes fixed on the table. His silver hair was perfectly combed despite the early hour, and his council robes hung loose on his gaunt frame. "Perhaps," Mitchell said slowly, "we should consider the possibility that this is a false flag operation. The Kavran are sophisticated. They could be manipulating our sensors to make us suspect each other." "The intrusion signatures are too clean," Jen replied. "This is coming from inside our network, not from external manipulation." Mitchell's hands tightened slightly, knuckles whitening. "Then we need to implement additional security measures, background checks, loyalty assessments, perhaps we need to examine the timing," Chris interrupted. "The breaches began after our last meeting. What was discussed in that meeting, Counselor Mitchell?" The stealth fleet deployment," Mitchell replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Fleet positions, tactical assignments, the gravitational cloaking network." The chamber erupted in accusations and denials. Counselors pointed fingers, voices raised in anger and fear. But Chris remained focused on Mitchell, noting the way the man's shoulders had slumped, the way his eyes now refused to meet anyone's gaze. "Dr. Reese," Chris said quietly, "can you trace the transmission vector?" Jen's fingers flew over her datapad. "The signal's been routed through multiple relay stations, but—" She paused, her face growing pale. "It's originating from Section C7, the senior staff quarters." The chamber fell silent. Section C7 housed only the highest-ranking officials, the council members themselves, senior military officers, and key scientific personnel. The pool of suspects had just narrowed dramatically. "We need to implement lockdown protocols," Vasquez said. "Full security sweep, communications monitoring, the works." "No," Chris replied. "If we alert the spy, they'll go to ground. We need to catch them in the act." Over the next several hours, Chris and Jen worked with Terra Station's security chief to implement a subtle surveillance network. Hidden sensors were placed throughout the senior quarters, and communication logs were quietly flagged for analysis. The investigation had to proceed carefully. Too aggressive, and they'd alert their quarry. Too slow, and the Kavran would learn everything about humanity's last desperate gambit. The breakthrough came at 300 hours. Jen burst into Chris's temporary office, her face flushed with excitement and exhaustion. "I've got them," she announced, activating a portable holo display. "The signal's been embedded in routine maintenance reports. Whoever's doing this has been using the station's automated systems to piggyback their transmissions." The display showed a complex data stream, but Jen's modifications highlighted the hidden information. Fleet positions, tactical assessments, even preliminary reports on the gravitational cloaking technology, all of it encoded within innocuous engineering reports. "Where's it going?" Chris asked. "That's the interesting part. The signal's being transmitted to a Kavran listening post on the edge of the system, but it's not going directly to their command structure." Jen manipulated the display, showing the transmission pathway. "It's being relayed through a stealth probe, something small enough to avoid our detection grids." Chris studied the data, his mind racing. "Can you trace the probe?" "Already done. It's positioned in the asteroid field near Ceres, perfectly positioned to intercept our transmissions and relay them to the main fleet." The implications were staggering. The Kavran had been receiving real-time intelligence on humanity's activities for weeks, possibly months. They knew about the stealth fleet, knew about the gravitational cloaking technology, knew about humanity's desperate plan to break the blockade. "We need to feed them false information," Chris said. "Use their own spy network against them." "What did you have in mind?" Chris smiled grimly. "We're going to make them think they've won. Let them believe the stealth fleet is broken, that our technology has failed, and while they're celebrating their victory, we'll show them what humanity is really capable of." The next phase of the plan was already forming in his mind. They would identify the spy, certainly, but more importantly, they would turn the enemy's intelligence advantage into a weapon. The Kavran thought they knew everything about humanity's capabilities. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had become a graveyard of human ambition. Derelict mining platforms drifted like metallic ghosts, their hulls scarred by Kavran plasma fire and the unforgiving vacuum of space. But hidden among the debris, 56 ships waited in perfect silence, their hulls bent spacetime around them like a technological mirage. Admiral Chris Kellerman stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, his weathered hands gripping the command railing as he studied the tactical display. The stealth frigates Phantom and Wraith had taken point position, their sensors probing the darkness for signs of enemy activity. Behind them, the main fleet hung in formation, invisible to all but the most sophisticated detection systems. Contact, Lieutenant Commander Kim Mitchell reported from the sensor station. Kavren Patrol, 3 light cruisers and a supply vessel, bearing 27 Mark IV, distance 40,000 kilometers. Chris nodded, his hazel eyes fixed on the display. The Kavren ships moved with the confident arrogance of predators in their own territory, their formations loose and their guard down. For months, they'd patrolled these shipping lanes without encountering meaningful resistance. That was about to change. Dr. Reese, he called to the science station. Field coherence? Jennifer Reese looked up from her console, her green eyes reflecting the blue glow of the gravitational field monitors. Stable at 97%. The network is holding. Signal the fleet. Attack pattern Delta. We go in silent, hit hard, and get out before they can respond. Throughout the stealth fleet, crews prepared for their first combat test. On the bridge of the frigate Phantom, Captain Maria Santos checked her weapon systems one final time. The young pilot beside her, Lieutenant Jake Morrison, flexed his hands on the controls, his brown eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Remember," Santos said quietly, "we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to make them think." Morrison nodded, his cocky smirk never wavering. "Think about what, Captain?" "About how much they don't know." The attack began without warning. The Phantom decloaked directly behind the trailing Kavren cruiser, its plasma cannons already charging. The first salvo punched through the alien ship's shields, sending cascades of energy across its hull. Before the enemy could respond, the frigate vanished back into its gravitational shroud. Chaos erupted across the Kavren formation. Alarm klaxons wailed as the alien ships tried to locate their attacker, their sensors sweeping empty space. The lead cruiser began an evasive turn, its captain's voice crackling across the comm channels in harsh, clicking syllables. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself." The translation software converted the alien speech into clipped, formal English. "You are in violation of Kavren territorial control." Chris smiled grimly. "They still think it's just one ship. Let's show them how wrong they are." The Wraith materialized off the enemy's starboard bow, its missiles already in flight. The Kavren supply vessel, caught completely off guard, took the full impact of the torpedo spread. Its hull buckled, atmosphere venting from a dozen breach points. But instead of pressing the attack, the Wraith faded back into invisibility, leaving the enemy to wonder where the next strike would come from. On the command ship of the Kavren Patrol, Captain Zektar's mandibles clicked with nervous energy. The insectoid officer had commanded this sector for 3 rotation cycles, and in all that time no human vessel had penetrated their perimeter. Now ships were appearing and disappearing like phantoms, striking without warning and vanishing before retaliation was possible. "Status report," Zektar demanded, its 6 limbs working the tactical controls with mechanical precision. "The Hive Singer is badly damaged," its second-in-command reported. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. The ship is still operational, but barely." "How many attackers?" "Unknown, Captain. Our sensors detect massive gravitational distortions, but no solid contacts. It's as if the space around us is folded." Zektar's multifaceted eyes processed this information. The humans had displayed new technology before. Their nuclear weapons, their crude but effective railguns, their stubborn refusal to surrender. But this was different. This was a fundamental advancement in their understanding of space-time manipulation. "Send a priority transmission to the command fleet," Zektar ordered. "The humans have developed stealth technology." "Repeat, the humans have developed stealth technology." The message flashed across the quantum communicator, traveling at faster than light speed toward the Kavren command fleet orbiting Jupiter. On the bridge of the Kavren Ascendant, the commander's mandibles spread in what might have been satisfaction. "So," it said, its translated voice carrying notes of genuine interest, "the humans have learned to hide. How quaint." The fleet's chief science officer, a crystalline Nexari, whose body refracted light into rainbow patterns, approached the command dais. "Should we adjust our sensor arrays, Commander?" "No," the commander replied. "Let them play their games. A few lost patrol ships mean nothing. When we move against their home system, their tricks will not save them. But back in the asteroid belt, the battle was far from over. The human fleet had revealed its capabilities, but it had also learned something crucial about the enemy. The Kavran formations were rigid, predictable, designed for overwhelming firepower rather than tactical flexibility. Their ships were powerful, but they were not prepared for an enemy that could strike from anywhere and vanish without a trace. "Third wave," Chris ordered. "All ships concentrated fire on the lead cruiser. Make it count." The entire stealth fleet decloaked simultaneously, 56 ships appearing from nothingness in a perfect sphere around the remaining Kavran vessels. For a moment, the enemy formation hung suspended in space, surrounded by humanity's hidden fleet like prey in a trap. Then the firing began. Plasma cannons, railguns, and missile batteries opened fire from every angle. The Kavran ships, caught in a perfect crossfire, were overwhelmed in seconds. Their shields flared and died. Their hulls buckled under the concentrated assault. The lead cruiser, its armored carapace cracked open like an egg, began to drift powerlessly. "Ceasefire," Chris commanded. "All ships, return to cloak. We're done here." The human fleet vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving the Kavran patrol broken and confused. Of the 4 enemy ships, 2 were destroyed and 2 were crippled. But more importantly, the aliens had been given a demonstration of humanity's new capabilities. "Signal the fleet," Chris ordered. "Rendezvous point Bravo. We've just announced our presence to the enemy. From now on, they'll be hunting us." As the stealth fleet disappeared into the asteroid field, leaving behind only wreckage and confused aliens, Chris allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The technology worked, the tactics were sound, and the enemy had just learned that humanity was far from beaten. But he also knew that the easy victories were over. The Kavran would adapt, would learn, would bring their full strength to bear against Earth's hidden fleet. The real battle was just beginning. In the depths of space, the message traveled toward Earth at light speed, carrying news of the first successful engagement. But it also carried a warning. The enemy now knew that humanity had teeth. The question was whether those teeth would be enough to bite through the throat of the Kavran coalition. The gravitational field generators hummed with deadly precision as the stealth fleet held position in the Kuiper Belt, their combined fields creating a zone of warped spacetime that made detection nearly impossible. On the bridge of the Defiant, Admiral Chris Kellerman reviewed the tactical reports from their first engagement, his weathered face reflecting the satisfaction of a plan well executed. "Damage assessment," he asked Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. "Minimal, sir. The Phantom took some minor plasma scoring, but all systems are operational. The fleet performed flawlessly." Chris nodded, but his sharp eyes caught the tension in Dr. Jennifer Reese's posture as she worked at the science station. Her fingers tapped against her console in the rapid rhythm he'd learned to associate with her deepest concentration or her worst fears. "Jen," he said quietly, approaching her station, "status of the cloaking network?" She looked up, and Chris saw the exhaustion in her green eyes. "The fields are stable, but we're pushing the generators to their limits. Each engagement puts tremendous strain on the system." "How much strain?" "Enough that I'm detecting microfractures in the field matrix. If we keep this up, the network will start failing within days, not weeks." Chris absorbed this information grimly. The stealth fleet's greatest advantage was also its greatest weakness. The technology was too new, too untested, too dependent on perfect synchronization across dozens of ships. But before he could respond, the communications array crackled to life. "Admiral," Mitchell called out, "priority transmission from Terra Station. It's Counselor Webb." Chris moved to the command console, accepting the encrypted signal. Webb's face appeared on the screen, his silver hair disheveled and his expression strained. "Admiral, we have a problem. The Kavran have responded to your attack faster than anticipated. They're repositioning their forces, concentrating their patrols in the outer system. More concerning, they seem to know exactly where to look." "What do you mean?" "Their search patterns are too precise. They're not conducting random sweeps. They're hunting in specific areas that correspond to our projected rally points." Chris felt a chill run down his spine. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that our security breach is still active. Whoever's feeding information to the Kavren is still in operation. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Chris stared at the blank screen, his mind racing through the implications. The spy they'd identified was still active, still feeding real-time intelligence to the enemy. The stealth fleet's locations, their tactics, their technological capabilities, all of it was being transmitted to the Kavren command. "Admiral," Mitchell said carefully, "if they know where we are." "Then we're sitting ducks," Chris finished. "Jen, how long to relocate the fleet?" "At least 6 hours to safely power down the field generators and move to a new position. The gravitational fields need to be synchronized." Her words were cut off by a proximity alarm. The bridge lights shifted to combat red as the sensor arrays detected massive gravitational distortions approaching their position. "Multiple contacts," Mitchell reported, her voice tight with tension. "Kavren heavy cruisers, at least 20 ships coming in fast." Chris gripped the command rail, his knuckles white. "They found us." On the main display, the tactical situation became clear. The Kavren fleet was approaching in a perfect search formation, their sensors sweeping the space where the human fleet lay hidden. But these weren't random patrols. The enemy ships were moving with purpose, their formation designed to detect and engage cloaked vessels. "How?" Jen whispered. "The field generators are stable. We should be invisible." Chris's mind raced. The stealth technology was sound, but the enemy had adapted faster than anticipated. They'd learned from the first engagement, modified their sensor arrays, perhaps even developed countermeasures. But more than that, they'd known exactly where to look. "The traitor," he said quietly. "They're not just feeding information to the Kavren, they're guiding them directly to us." The enemy formation began to spread out, their ships taking positions that would allow them to sweep the entire asteroid field. Chris realized with growing horror that they weren't just hunting, they were preparing for a coordinated attack on a position they knew was occupied. "Admiral," Mitchell said urgently, "the lead ships are charging weapons. They're going to fire blind into our formation." Chris made the decision that would save the fleet and potentially doom Earth's last hope. All ships, emergency power to engines, scatter formation, full evasion. The order ripped through the fleet, bypassing standard protocols. There was no time for synchronized power downs or careful repositioning. The Defiant shuddered as its massive engines flared, gravitational cloaking shimmering precariously. Around them, the other 55 ships reacted with desperate speed, their own engines roaring to life as they broke formation and plunged into the chaotic depths of the asteroid field. Plasma bolts, thick and crimson, lanced through the void where the human fleet had been moments before. The Kavren heavy cruisers, their weapons firing on pre-calculated coordinates, unleashed a torrent of destructive energy. Asteroids vaporized, their rocky fragments scattering into a deadly hail. But the human ships, though exposed for a terrifying fraction of a second, were already gone, their cloaks flickering back into full effect as they accelerated away from the kill zone. "Report!" Chris barked, his eyes scanning the tactical display. The blue markers representing his fleet were now scattered, each ship a tiny, isolated point against the encroaching red of the Kavren. "2 frigates took direct hits, Admiral." Mitchell's voice was strained. "The Vigilance and the Stalwart are venting atmosphere. No signs of lifeboats." A cold knot formed in Chris's stomach. 2 ships lost in seconds. 24 brave souls gone. But the rest of the fleet had survived, scattered but intact. The Kavren had been denied their easy victory. "Jen, can you still track the spy's transmission?" Chris asked, turning to Dr. Reese. She was hunched over her console, her brow furrowed in concentration. "They're still active, Admiral. The signal's intermittent now, probably due to the Kavren's own sensor interference, but it's still there. It's coming from Terra Station, Section C7, just as before." "They're still guiding them," Chris muttered, his jaw tightening. "They're trying to pinpoint us as we move." "What's the plan, Admiral?" Mitchell asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. Chris looked out at the swirling chaos of the asteroid field, his mind working furiously. They couldn't stay here. The Kavren would eventually sweep the entire sector, and their cloaking technology wouldn't hold up to sustained, targeted fire. They needed to move, but where? And how could they neutralize the traitor without revealing their hand? We lead them on a chase, Chris decided. Make them think they're close, but keep them guessing. And while we do, we send a message back to Terra Station. A very specific message. He turned to Jen. Can you embed a false signal within the spy's transmission? Something that looks like a confirmation of our destruction, but actually contains a hidden directive for our forces? Jen's eyes lit up, the exhaustion momentarily forgotten. It's risky. If the Kavren detect the anomaly, they'll know we're onto them. We don't have a choice, Chris said grimly. We need to buy time, and we need to turn their own intelligence against them, give them a ghost to chase. Over the next few hours, the asteroid field became a deadly game of cat and mouse. The human stealth frigates, using their superior maneuverability, darted through the debris, drawing the Kavren heavy cruisers deeper into the treacherous environment. The larger alien ships, designed for open space combat, struggled to navigate the dense asteroid field, their hulls scraping against rock and their sensor arrays overwhelmed by the natural interference. Meanwhile, Dr. Reese worked feverishly, crafting the deceptive signal. She wove a complex data package into the spy's outgoing transmissions, a message that would appear to the Kavren as confirmation of the stealth fleet's destruction, but to any human receiver, it would contain a single critical command: execute Operation Chimera. Back on Terra Station, Counselor David Mitchell, his face a mask of carefully constructed calm, watched the tactical displays. The Kavren fleet was sweeping the asteroid belt, their search patterns tightening. He felt a surge of triumph. Soon, the last vestiges of human resistance would be eradicated, and his carefully cultivated position within the new order would be secured. He activated his hidden comm unit, a tiny device embedded in his signet ring. The fleet is breaking up, he whispered, his voice barely audible. They're scattering, taking heavy losses. The cloaking technology is failing. Confirm full destruction within the next hour. The signal, routed through the stealth probe near Ceres, pulsed through the void. Unbeknownst to Mitchell, it now carried Jen's hidden payload, a digital Trojan horse designed to turn his betrayal into humanity's salvation. On the bridge of the Kavren Ascendant, the commander's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. The human resistance is collapsing, it announced to its bridge crew. Their stealth technology was a momentary nuisance. Their fleet is being systematically dismantled. The Nixari science officer, its crystalline body shimmering, approached the command dais. Commander, our sensors are detecting a peculiar energy signature from the asteroid belt. It's faint, but consistent. A dying ember, the commander dismissed, their last gasp. Focus on the main objective, the final assault on Earth. We will crush their spirit and bring their world into the coalition. But the Nixari persisted. The signature is unique. It matches no known human technology, yet it is emanating from their supposed stealth vessels, and it is growing stronger. The commander paused, its multifaceted eyes narrowing. Explain. It appears to be a highly complex gravitational field, but not one designed for cloaking. It is pulling, drawing in energy from the surrounding space like a miniature black hole. Back in the asteroid field, the Defiant and the remaining stealth ships had converged on a predetermined rendezvous point. The gravitational field generators, pushed far beyond their intended limits, glowed with an ominous blue light. Jen, her face streaked with sweat and grime, watched the power readings with grim satisfaction. "It's ready, Admiral," she gasped. "Operation Chimera is online. The gravitational singularity is stable." Chris looked at the main display. Instead of cloaking, the combined gravitational fields of the fleet were now focused inward, creating a localized pocket of extreme space-time distortion. It was a desperate, unheard-of maneuver, a weaponized application of their cloaking technology. "Target the Kavren command fleet," Chris ordered, his voice a low growl. "Full power, fire." The space around the human fleet rippled, then seemed to tear open. A wave of pure gravitational energy, invisible but devastating, surged outward from the Defiant's position. It was not a beam or a projectile, but a localized distortion of reality itself, designed to rip apart anything caught within its grasp. On the bridge of the Kavren Ascendant, the Nixari science officer shrieked, "Commander, the energy signature! It's a gravitational wave. It's targeting us. The commander's eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible. Their technology is primitive. They cannot wield such power. But it was too late. The gravitational wave, moving at the speed of thought, slammed into the Kavran command fleet. Shields flared and collapsed. Hulls groaned and buckled. The very fabric of space around the alien ships began to warp and twist, tearing apart their structural integrity. The Kavran Ascendant, a vessel that had never known defeat, was caught in the epicenter of the blast. Its iridescent hull fractured, its internal systems imploded, and with a final silent scream of tortured metal, it disintegrated into a cloud of shimmering debris. Chaos erupted throughout the Kavran fleet. Ships spun out of control, their command structure shattered. The coordinated attack on the asteroid field dissolved into a panicked retreat as the surviving alien vessels tried to escape the invisible, terrifying force that had just annihilated their flagship. "Cease fire," Chris ordered, his voice hoarse. The gravitational singularity shimmered for a moment longer, then faded as the generators powered down, exhausted. "Damage report on enemy fleet," he asked, his eyes still fixed on the main display, where the red markers of the Kavran were now scattering in disarray. "Massive losses, Admiral," Mitchell reported, her voice filled with awe. "Their command ship is gone. Multiple heavy cruisers destroyed or crippled. They're in full retreat." A wave of cheers erupted on the Defiance bridge, quickly spreading through the entire fleet. Exhausted, terrified, but triumphant, the human crews celebrated their impossible victory. "Jen," Chris said, turning to her, "the traitor, what about the signal?" Jen smiled, a tired but victorious grin. "The moment we activated Operation Chimera, the sheer gravitational output overwhelmed the stealth probe's delicate systems. It's fried, Admiral, and so is the spy's connection." Back on Terra Station, Counselor David Mitchell's hidden comm unit went dead. He tapped it frantically, his face paling as he watched the Kavran tactical display dissolve into chaos. Their ships were fleeing, their formations broken. His carefully constructed betrayal had just been obliterated along with their flagship. He knew, with chilling certainty, that his time was up. He moved to the nearest emergency escape pod, his mind racing, but before he could reach it, the doors hissed open. Admiral Kellerman stood there, flanked by two heavily armed security officers. "Counselor Mitchell," Chris said, his voice cold and hard, "I believe we have some questions for you." Mitchell slumped, all resistance gone. The jig was up. In the aftermath, the Kavran coalition, reeling from the loss of their command structure and the terrifying demonstration of humanity's new weapon, initiated a full retreat from the solar system. Their rigid command hierarchy, so effective in overwhelming lesser species, proved to be their undoing when faced with an unpredictable and devastating new threat. Without their central authority, their vast armada dissolved into disorganized pockets, each focused on self-preservation. Humanity, battered but unbroken, began the long process of rebuilding. The stealth fleet, now hailed as the saviors of Earth, became the core of a new, more resilient defense force. Dr. Jennifer Reese, her genius finally recognized, was given unlimited resources to further develop gravitational technology, ensuring that humanity would never again be caught unprepared. Admiral Chris Kellerman, the reluctant hero, oversaw the reconstruction efforts, his weathered face now bearing the lines of a man who had stared into the abyss and pulled his species back from the brink. The lessons learned from the Kavran invasion were etched deep into humanity's collective consciousness. Never underestimate a species fighting for its survival, and never assume you know the full extent of their capabilities. The traitor, David Mitchell, was tried and convicted, his betrayal a stark reminder of the internal vulnerabilities that could threaten even the most united front. His actions, however, ultimately served to highlight humanity's resilience and its ability to overcome even the deepest treachery. Years later, as the first human colony ships ventured beyond the solar system, protected by advanced gravitational drives and cloaking technology, the stars no longer seemed like a battlefield. They were a frontier, full of endless possibilities. The Kavran, though still a distant threat, had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity would never kneel. And as the new generation of human explorers looked out at the vast, welcoming cosmos, They carried with them the quiet confidence of a species that had faced extinction and emerged stronger, more determined, and eternally defiant. The universe was vast, and humanity was finally ready to explore it on its own terms.